Serious. People who have lived in a haunted house. What are your most unexplainable paranormal experiences? Closest I've gotten to a haunted house is a haunted room. I used to sleep on the second floor, the bottom one being the first, and my sister in the attic. She used to have sleep paralysis often. Then she moved out, and now I have her old room. She no longer has sleep paralysis, but I do. My uncle's house out on a very eastern part of New York was said to be haunted due to the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stableman and sold it instead. He and the maid were said to have haunted the place. We always used to joke that you would hear people or things moving at night, but since the house is so old, we used to just laugh it off. My uncle's friend had her and her sister stay over the house one night, and the friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs when she woke. She saw the maid again, bringing what looked like a percolator down the stairs. She was so impressed by my uncle hiring staff, he's a neurologist in New York City, so he had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went, and she thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained, and he laughed, walked her to the living room, and pointed to an old picture. She said that was the woman. My uncle replied, "Yeah, she's been dead for about 100 years. I lived in a house for about 5 years that was haunted, but not in a malicious way, in a crappy roommate kind of way. I'd come home to the windows on the second floor being open when it was raining, to food containers being open in the fridge that I hadn't touched yet. The worst was that the ghost hated clocks. She hated them. I had antique cuckoo clocks that had worked for 50 years that would just stop. Brand new wall clocks that ate through batteries like it was candy. My watch ended up on the floor one morning. The crystal shattered even though I knew I slept with it on. The one that peed me off the most was that I got a brand new Kit Kat clock for Christmas and she threw it off the wall. I was cooking and out of the corner of my eye saw the cat freaking fly. Turned around and it was across the kitchen, broken. It was brand new. Part of this just feels to me like you might be just really forgetful, but that last one is a little harder to pass off as just forgetting. Maybe you forgot about the catapult you set up in the other room? I've got nothing. I lived in an old haunted house in college. Things got so weird that everyone moved out except for me and one roommate. Here's a few. 1. Woke up at 3 a.m. because my roommate's door kept opening and slamming shut. From bed, I yelled for him to stop, only to realize I was the only one home that weekend. As soon as I yelled, the slamming stopped, but the hippie beads I had hanging outside my closed door began to sway perfectly yet violently against the door frame for a half hour, while I debated if I should pop out my air conditioning unit and jump out of the window. I laid in the fetal position in bed till it stopped. 2. I woke up at 3 a.m. alone again, hearing the Nintendo in the back porch playing loudly. I figured a drunk kid came in and started playing. I grabbed a bat and walked toward the back of the house as the music got louder and louder. As soon as I opened the door, it was completely quiet. Mind you, it was loud enough to wake me up. 3. I had friends over and told them the house was haunted. No one believed me, so I asked the ghost to do anything to prove it was there. As soon as I asked, all the lights in the house began flickering for about a minute straight. This was the middle of the day. Everyone witnessed it. 4. Almost everyone who stayed at my house had sleep paralysis at least once in the house. 5. Every time something spooky happened, the house would smell like old lady, flowery, strong perfume. Ugh. 6. This house had a door built into the flooring that led to the basement. We always had a rug covering it up so no one knew it was there. Things would constantly go missing in the house and turning up in the basement. This house had a coal chute from when it was heated by coal back in the day. Missing stuff would always be placed on the chute for us to come and get. 7. Roommate had some issues. Once, while playing video games late at night, he saw mist kind of hovering from the kitchen, then move into the bathroom. The bathroom had a trap door that led to the attic. That's where we figured the old lady ghost used to like to hang out. 8. Roommate was up late. He went to go lock the doors and turn off lights. When he turned his back on the room and walked to the door, someone breathed into his ear. He thought it was me. I was sleeping. He turned around, peed himself, and ran to his room. He was too afraid to come out and turn off the lights and TV. 9. Loud thumps in attic at all hours. For peace of mind, we told ourselves squirrels must have gotten in there. 10. Voices would wake us up in the middle of the night. I spent many mornings on the front porch waiting for the sun to come up before I went back into the house. 11. Coincidentally, I had a friend years later that rented from the same landlord, same town, different house, where he and all of his roommates moved out because that house was also haunted. I didn't think it was too weird until he was telling me that when all of the weird stuff happened, it was accompanied by old lady flowering stanky perfume. Also, a lot of people had sleep paralysis in that house as well. Okay, so I went from, wow, that sounds like a lot of evidence. I wouldn't mind seeing that house on a paranormal investigation show, to hearing about the landlord and going, oh, that landlord has some kind of kink where he likes to pretend to be a ghost and haunts his tenants. Still scary, but in a very different way. I watched one of our cats being pulled backwards about 5 feet by her tail. She was walking through the dining area and suddenly was sliding backwards as if someone was pulling her by her tail. Only there wasn't. She freaked out and tried to run, but couldn't immediately as something held on for a brief second before letting her go. I tend to think that was the handiwork of a 4 or 5-year-old girl ghost who hangs out and she just wanted to play with the kitty. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my girlfriend at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself in the webcam. Behind me, there was the stairs leading up left of camera view and the entrance to the living room right of camera view. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam view, I saw my sister leaving the living room and going up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an older Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud as F. Without saying anything to my girlfriend, I got up and looked into the living room, and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my girlfriend if she had seen anything on my camera. She said, yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs. My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the car with my mom, and we were waiting on my sister who was still in the house. After a bit, she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like, what the F? I asked her what's wrong, and she says that just before she walked out of the house, she thought I was still inside, so she yelled up the stairs, 1LT obvious, we're leaving. And apparently I yelled back, okay, I'll be down in a minute. Edit. Some more examples since many people have asked. My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot, and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed who faded out after a couple seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt like someone was under my covers laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated and I no longer felt anything. I included this with the doppelgangers because though I didn't see what I felt under the blanket, it laid like my girlfriend would have laid against me. When I was 22, I was in the military and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is black zip-up pouch, and it has a glucometer, insulin pen, needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left my home to head back from leave, my mom texted me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look, and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. Apparently, my sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window, propped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also, her bedroom is on the 2nd floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. It sounds like these ghosts are trying to talented Mr. Ripley you or something. Tommy, how's the haunting? Tommy, how's the haunting? When I was around 9 to 10 years old, I remember waking up to see a large shadow stood at the foot of my bed. I was living with my dad at the time. He has a very large 5 floors terrace house built in the 1800s. Every so often, there would be an unexplainable event happen, such as footsteps when there's no one there or voices. On the night this happened, it was just my dad and I in the house. My sister was staying with my mom at the time. I woke up and noticed the door to my room was wide open. I normally slept with it closed. I then became aware of a large, around 7-foot-tall, shadow-like figure watching me from the end of the bed. When the figure noticed me, it seemed to melt into the floor and the door to my room slammed shut. Understandably, I was slightly traumatized by the whole experience. Asked my dad the next day if he was in my room, and he denied any knowledge of the event. He's not the type of person that likes jokes. My husband and I own a martial arts school, and the building that it's in, which we also own, is about 130 years old, next to a church. And I never, and still don't really, there has to be another explanation, believed in the paranormal, but the things that happened in it didn't just happen to me. It was decrepit, which was why it was so cheap to purchase, and we basically did all the work ourselves, old, creaky, and drafty. Still, knob and tube that we had to get an electrician to change out. So, here's a bunch of things that happened. When we'd be working with drills and electric saws, I'd hear the tinkling of a music box and I'd stop everyone to ask if they heard it too. No one else did, so I assumed it must have been some music from the church coming through. My husband would often hear a woman's voice calling his name from the bottom of the stairs. It's 2 floors, a basement, and a loft, and thinking it was me back from work, he would always ask to come up. Turns out the building was empty. Happened 4 or 5 times. One night, there's a small apartment on the 2nd floor connected to a large hall. We woke up hearing what sounded like a broom sweeping across the wooden floors in the large hall. My husband got up to go check, but once he would walk in there, the sweeping sound would stop. It happened 3 more times that night. We chalked it up to mice or squirrels. We did find mummified squirrels in the attic once. We had a barbecue in the backyard, and I needed to go get more utensils. There's a metal stairwell from the backyard up to the 2nd floor, and then there's the main entrance staircase opposite to that. I came up the main entrance and heard footsteps pacing back and forth across the far end of the hall and thought my husband came up from the metal stairwell to get utensils with me. It was dark and I couldn't see anything. I called out for him, and the pacing stopped. No response, and then the pacing footsteps continued. Annoyed, I thought he was messing with me, so I flipped on the lights, and all of the utensils from the shelf where I heard the pacing crashed down to the floor like I spooked something. But there wasn't anything, not even a rat like I thought there might be. One Saturday morning, my husband was on his computer in another room. I'm in the apartment playing with a Tamagotchi app on my iPad when I heard the stereo sitting in front of me click on and a girl's voice started talking from it. I thought he controlled the stereo from his computer, so I ignored it because he often puts on music to work out before class started. He teaches the morning class. I do remember thinking what kind of weird butt indie music he's listening to anyway, because the voice just said, "Hi, my name is..." I thought I heard Katie, but I'm not 100% sure because I wasn't paying attention. I have never known a Katie in my life. "I am blank years old. I'm from blank," etc. I didn't catch the specifics because I wasn't really listening, but that went on for about 2 or 3 minutes until it suddenly went, "Something's hurting me." And when I caught that, I looked up and squinted at the stereo like, "What?" "Something's killing me. Something killed me." At this point, the hair is standing on the back of my neck and I'm getting up from the couch to take a closer look. "Please, someone tell my parents, tell the teachers, tell the corrections officer." At the word corrections officer, I just bolted into the other room and started yelling at my husband and cursing him out because I was certain he was playing a trick on me. Told him, "We don't play jokes about dead people," and he's of course looking at me like, "What the F?" Then he finally calms me down long enough to get what I heard out of me and what I was accusing him of. He told me it was impossible and led me to the stereo. It's not plugged in. I thought maybe the stereo picked up the signals from an ebook or something. So after that last fiasco, I went to ask our live-in student who lived with his girlfriend in the basement apartment of the building if anything weird's happened. They shot each other an alarmed look and told me this. One, his girlfriend was sleeping one night when he was working overnight and she heard footsteps come down the stairs and their door open and then close. All of a sudden, a bright flashlight shines in her face and she can just make out the silhouette of who she thought was her boyfriend because he's tall and she can see the dirty jeans he's wearing. She's annoyed thinking he's messing with her, so she's swatted at him and telling him to stop. Finally, she gets so peed off she rolls, turns on their lamp, and there's no one there. 2, they sometimes hear footsteps on the 1st floor when there's no one in the building. They had a pet mouse at the time, and whenever that happened, it would start doing backflips in its tank. However, when class is going on and there are people in the building, the mouse didn't care and just went about its mousy business. 3, they were play wrestling one day when suddenly their African gray parrot ruffled its feathers and in a really alarmed voice asked, "Who's there? Who's there?" They thought it was funny at first, so our student looked at the bird and pointed to the door and said, "You mean over here?" and ran toward the door to open it. As he did that, all the books that were lining the shelf on the way to the door fell over in front of him and the light started flickering. The bird and the mouse both got spooked and were throwing themselves against their cages. Our second live-in student after the first one got married to his girlfriend, got their own home, had a baby, several times could just not find his phone when he woke up in the morning when he had placed it next to his bed the night before. He would search his room high and low, and then he'd find it perfectly placed outside his locked bedroom door on the floor. I thought he might have been sleepwalking, but his girlfriend said she'd realized it if he did since she's a very light sleeper, so don't know what that's about. Nothing notable has happened since then, but we have also not had anyone stay there overnight in years. Edited to add for all these similar questions. 1. I only looked into it very slightly because, again, I am more inclined to believe it's just the stereo picked up an ebook someone was listening to. However, for all you ghost hunters out there, feel free to look it up in the About Me pages of my food blog, which is in my profile. There's a link to the school which includes the address. Have fun. Let me know if you find anything exceptionally creepy. 2, since it was such an old building and we did most of the work ourselves, as in there was no functional bathrooms or anything and I can now lay tile like a pro, it could have been hallucinogenic mold that affected everyone. 3, I had, some years prior to this, had a week of hallucinating people who weren't there and spiders which had increasingly insane colors, but they were also tactile hallucinations because I felt them on my hands as well. I otherwise have no issues, and those symptoms never occurred again after that bizarre week. So it could be we all had some hallucinations. I have to say, it would make for a pretty interesting horror movie to have it start off that people are just hallucinating things because of mold, but then things get more and more out of hand where they're all questioning if it could actually still be hallucinations or what. And in the end, the only way to know for sure is if the mouse only does backflips when there are actual ghosts. Sorry, but I love that part of this story and want more ghost-sensitive mice who backflip. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old, I absolutely refused to go upstairs. The upstairs had 2 large closets, attics. They ran from one side of the upstairs all the way to the other side on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was maybe 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl sitting there in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost they aren't scared, just interested. Nope, I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair, a nice dress, and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend, and got out of the closet. Told him when I saw him there. He said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would get up there, I would see the doors swing open, as if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere. Suddenly, my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents out of the attic, and we would find some of my toys in there. I remember being 8 years old, my parents are asleep still in the morning, and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog, usually up for anything, refused to go off the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me with all the weird things that happened in that house. I would get blamed for things that happened all over the house, leaving lights on, toys all over, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyway, we moved out of there when I was 10. Not a week passes before the new owners call us up and ask if the house is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs and she says that she has been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They kept in contact with us. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl sitting on their daughter's lap, etc. They looked up on the computer the past owners of the house, found an old dressmaker that lived there, and yep, a picture of the little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there were absolutely torn apart by the event. Got divorced, dad stayed living in the house, and ended up taking his own life in that house. I used to live in an old, big, 5-bedroom house with 6 other people. My significant other and I shared one of the rooms. I saw a stranger in my room when I was in my 20s. It wasn't exactly visible, but I somewhat knew it was right there in the corner of the room. My significant other was next to me sleeping. While I had my eyes open, I knew it was there. So I closed my eyes. I tried to wish it away. I opened my eyes, and it was now next to the bed looking at me. I closed my eyes again, and suddenly relief came. I opened my eyes, nothing there. I saw it once again at the stairs. It was only a brief moment this time, and then it was gone. See, now that one there sounds like a possible sleep paralysis episode. That crap is scary, and I had it happen to me a couple times in my late teens and early 20s. Not sure why it stopped, but I am glad it did. I had fallen asleep at night with my fan running and woke up freezing. I turned it off. Not long after, I woke up hot and turned it back on. This happened several times. The last time I woke up hot once again, and the moment I opened my eyes, I heard the pull of my fan and looked up to see it slowly start speeding up. I said, "Thank you," and fell back asleep. I live in a house built in the 1800s. It survived the 2 world wars, and it's seen some crap, I imagine. One of the previous owners had 2 sons who both committed self-termination. A lot of strange stuff happened. The animals, dog and parrots, will wake up from their naps and follow something with their heads just as they would follow me if I walk around. Also, before I switched rooms in the house, my brother had a room and he refused to sleep there as he would hear voices. He slept with my parents, he was a child, until the day he got my old room, and since then has slept in that room without problems. There's also a whole floor we don't use and I sleep in the attic, and I pass through that floor to get to my attic. Weird explanation, but it's a weird house. And I have a motion-activated light there that goes on as I'm walking the stairs to that unused floor. It would also switch on in the middle of the night while nobody is walking under the motion detector. Also, there's cold spots. In 2012, my stepfather overdosed on H and dropped dead in the hallway in his condo apartment. My mom had to move out shortly after since they were already behind on mortgage bills. A few months later, my lease went up and I was barely making ends meet and couldn't find a new roommate. My mom offered me the key to the condo apartment to squat for a few months until I saved up enough for my own apartment. I took the offer and moved into the condo apartment. After a month or so, I was asleep in the living room and I had this dream of him standing in the hallway facing the living room. He was just looking at me and smiling/laughing, even made a stupid joke and everything. It wasn't disturbing at all, just bittersweet. Then I suddenly woke when I felt some pressure stroking down my head and back. There was nothing around me and it tripped me the heck out. As a skeptical person that doesn't believe in the paranormal, it has to be some kinds of sensory hallucination. It was still nice to see him in my dream once again, though. Made me tear up typing this. Rest in peace, Darren. Mildly interesting fact, he dropped dead on July 13th in 2012, on a Friday the 13th. I lived in one when I was a teen along with my parents. Several instances come to mind. We were remodeling an old farmhouse and had been there a couple of months before witnessing anything. One day, I was underneath my truck, which was supported by only a jack. Stupid, I know. I was in the middle of working on it with no good reason to get out at that moment. Suddenly, the overwhelming urge to get out from underneath overwhelmed me. No sooner than I got out, the truck fell to the ground. The jack had slipped. Freaked Dad out. He thought I was under it. When Mom got home, we mentioned it, and she started crying, sobbing pretty hard. It turned out the previous owner died in the driveway under a vehicle in that spot. I would often see moving shadows and strangely hear music from the upstairs area. The windows of the old house were cocked shut, and blackbirds would often get caught between the panes. We ended up replacing all the windows, but we had to break 3 inside panes to get them out. One of the more disturbing things happened when my mother was cooking breakfast. She turned away to get something out of the cabinet, and when she turned back around, all the forks set out were bent straight up. I feel like I could explain away the truck falling one if I really wanted to. Maybe you heard a super low sound that you registered subconsciously, and maybe that driveway was just not flat or something. Who knows? Forks bending straight up? Yeah, sorry. No skeptic response from me. My father-in-law died before my son was born, so he never met him. When we moved into our new home, my son would often be laughing in the middle of the night by himself. No biggie, kids will play with anything. One day, we were finally putting pictures up in the house, and once I put up the picture of my father-in-law, he said, "Oh, Mommy, why do you have a picture of the man that comes and play with me at night?" He had never seen a picture of my father-in-law before. I'm not exactly sure what to believe since a lot of the paranormal occurrences happened to my dad, but I definitely saw and heard some creepy crap while living in a house in my teens. We'd very frequently just have a sense of anxiety and foreboding in the house, which on its own isn't paranormal, but certainly made it very uneasy staying there. I read somewhere that radon exposure can cause anxiety, and the house did have a radon problem, so maybe that could have been it. but I also would hear footsteps around the house when I was the only one there and just constantly felt like someone was watching me. My dad got the worst of it and claimed he could hear sounds coming from the basement at night. His bedroom was right near, whereas mine was upstairs, so I never heard any of it, but I'm an extremely deep sleeper. Then the traditional slams, bangs, and crashes throughout the house. My dad also claimed he would hear knocking on the cellar door. Sometimes he would hear a woman screaming. Supposedly every family who had ever lived there experienced something. There are 3 distinct things that stand out. The night before we moved out, my dad claims he woke up because he felt a sudden hard tapping on his head. My brother's girlfriend was staying over and my dad and me were gone. We came back to find that his girlfriend's daughter was terrified because she saw a shadow in the corner of the room. I chalked it up to kids' imagination running wild. One time my dad was practicing with his band in the basement and was expecting me back from a Christmas party. He claims he heard heavy footsteps from upstairs and thought it was me, so he went upstairs to greet me and nobody was home. I got home about a half hour later. It got to the point where my dad had the house blessed, and the priest claims to have been terrified and refused to go into the house at first. This was around the time I was becoming an atheist, so I didn't really believe in any of that, but I definitely experienced the uneasiness and occasional random noises, but never experienced any of the screaming or knocking my dad claims to have heard. At one point, we had some people from TAPS associated with, but not on the Ghost Hunter show, visit us and do a sweep of the house. We got some of the obvious orb pictures with both me and my brother thought were dumb as hell, but at one point, being a bit of an edgelord thinking I had psychic powers, told them to take a picture in one specific spot. The result was an image of what appeared to be a ghostly bust of a person with a demented face. We tried to explain it as a reflection from the washing machine, but it looked too much like a person. If I can dig up the image, I'll post it, but I'll have to dig through my dad's Facebook account. We also have an entry on the website, The Shadowlands, that I submitted. Look for the entry for Quobog Avenue here. P.S. There was one hilarious instance where I came home from school one day and immediately felt the uneasiness and felt like I was definitely being watched. My blood went cold and I was starting to feel a bit panicked. I turned around and my grandmother was there and started laughing her butt off at how she had scared me. She had been there the whole time and I somehow walked right past her without seeing her. Miss you, Graham. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.